from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word and another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, April 12th, 2019. This is actually our last news, nuggets, and insights before Passover. And then you'll get another new one right after Passover on the night to be much observed. We've got a lot. We got a lot of information, very important information I want to bring to you. I want to do a follow-up that we began last week on the Midwest flooding. Now they're telling us it was worse than originally thought, and we're going to bring you an update on that. Chick-fil-A, just talked about them last week. They're back in the news again. This is our segment we're calling the Canary in the Mine. Then Louis Farrakhan, self-proclaimed Messiah. You want to hold on for this one. Make sure that you catch this part of our program. Farrakhan is going to bring in a lot of information that's going to put together some puzzles that Satan seems to be working on to usher in his return. All right, so now finally we got Passover and the duality of God's plan. And we're going to answer that question that we left you with last week. All right, so now let's begin with this. Just in case you forgot, April 15th is tax day. I got mine done. So now we got a little reminder from Caruso and Oakley. They want to wish everyone the very best on your taxes this year. We have a little video. And as they tell us, remember, don't forget to render unto Caesar what's Caesar's. Let's play this little minute video and I'll be right back. Well, does that remind you of anything? Maybe that looked like one of us as we were doing our taxes this past year. Couldn't help it, we had to bring it in before tax time. Don't forget, April 15th. All righty, now, let's take a couple of short news stories first. As anti-EU party wins in the Dutch elections, talking about another Nexit. All right, this is talking about a takeoff of Brexit. The pro-European Union, the EU-Dutch political establishment, was stunned when an anti-EU far-right populist party was the shocking big winner in provincial elections in the Netherlands. Numerous other countries in the EU are now considering leaving the EU. All right, the Dutch far-right leader wanted to vote on Nexit. Some politicians predicted a secessionist contention, but there might be a Swexit, a Czechit, and an Italia leave. So why am I bringing that out to you? This is another one of those things this is like a clue. This is one of those things you want to put on your radar. We're talking about Daniel, the book of Daniel. We talked about the 2 legs and the 10 toes. We're talking about the Revelation chapter 17, verses 12 and 13. Take a look at this. And the 10 horns which you saw were 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but have received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength to the beast. So somewhere between where the UN now, not UN, but the EU is now, and to where we see in Revelation and Daniel prophetic fulfillment, many of these nations are going to be pulling out of the EU market, or they'll be realigning so that we have 10 toes or 10 kings, the governing power, which is going to be a king in the north, which is going to unite with the Holy Roman revival and the beast that we see in Revelation 13 and Revelation 17. So here what we're seeing now, just as Great Britain has pulled out, the Netherlands wants to pull out, and then France wants to possibly pull out, and Czechoslovakia wants to pull out, and Italy wants to pull out. So we're seeing a big exit coming in. The Brexit has created quite a problem for the EU. But the reality is this is biblical fulfillment coming to pass, because there's going to be 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, who's all going to pull all this together. So I'm bringing that to you today because this just went unannounced, because this was about a week or so ago, totally unannounced, that they're talking about leaving, so that the people there voted, let's get out of this EU. All right, so keep that in mind. All right, let's keep going now. This is from Breitbart. This is another short story. Atlanta mayor welcomes drag queen story hour to City Hall after the library pulls support. This is amazing, that even when people in the city of Atlanta, they didn't want it, they just wanted to pull it out, the mayor comes in and says, we'll take you over here, and brings them to wherever they're going to be on the taxpayer dollar, continue to bring in story hour by drag queens. This is amazing. All right, this is from Keisha Last Bottoms, which is the mayor of Atlanta. She's writing to Miss Terracotta Sugar Baker. And all of our LGBTQ friends are always welcome at the Atlanta City Hall. How about we host your next story hour? Well, isn't that amazing? That even when people try to get away from it, it's just thrown right down their throat and then charge them out of the taxes in City Hall to be able to accomplish it. Keisha Lance Bottom, mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, tweeted the invitation Friday to allow the drag queen story hour at City Hall after the Atlanta Fulton Public Library removed one of the story hours from its calendar. Certainly don't want to offend the LGBTQ community. Okay. All right, our next story. Canada, a Canadian fined $55,000. Canadian Tribune fines man $55,000 for misgendering. So the story is that because he offended someone by calling him under a different gender name, that he was fined $55,000. Many people are spreading this across the internet. Actually, it's not a true story. Somebody had actually made that up. So it's not real news. There is no jail in Canada for misusing gender. So I went online, I checked it all out, and this is actually what they found. That the question was, has anyone been fined, much less put in jail, in Canada for not using people's gender pronouns? The answer was no, because there's no law against it in Canada. It has happened in Great Britain, but it hasn't happened in Canada. You can actually read the entire text. I have it here. But I just want to mention to everybody, but sometimes people pass along information that comes into your box, your mailbox. Sometimes it's just not factual. And we try to do everything we can here that when we report a story that we've actually done our homework to prove what I'm telling you to be actually correct. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that to you. All right, let's get into our first story now. The Midwest, it's called the Midwest Apocalypse. 1 million acres of U.S. farmland devastated by floods. Overall, the recent flooding caused at least $3 billion in economic damage, according to authorities, but many believe that that final number will be far higher. And I do too. I honestly believe that all the information that I've just seen, that I've been researching, it's going to go a lot higher than this. I'd be surprised if Nebraska alone doesn't reach that point. It doesn't begin to tell the story of all the damages, that's what they said. So next week we'll bring this to you and bring you multiple long-range problems from this flood that is far from over. Now, I've got some stuff today, but I want to try to pick it up more next week as they continue to carry it through, because this is going to be long-term, and this is why. Watch what's going on. Over 1 million acres, a million acres of farmland. It's Nebraska's worst natural disaster, and that's just one state. 8 states have been affected by all of this. Now, this is the picture that I showed you before about Nebraska's worst flood. Governor Pete Ricketts called Nebraska its worst natural disaster state emergencies in 74 of 85 of its cities. 74 of 85 of its cities in Nebraska alone. Record crest in the state's major rivers. Early estimates of $440 million of infrastructure damage, $85 million to homes and businesses, and about 200 miles of destroyed roads, and at least 15 state bridges that are damaged or totally washed away. So we're talking something serious here. Nebraska is going to have long-term effects. In the picture, what I'm showing you here, and it's kind of painful just to bring out some of these pictures of the animals. But you can see all this farmland. It's just washed away. It's just mud. There's no more grass for the people. And you see where the animals are just kind of herded up in some of the drier areas where you see there. And before the flooding, they had massive amounts of snow. And so as some of the stories was they did what they could to feed their animals till they couldn't do any more. And a lot of animals began dying from the snow. And then when the rains came, washed away all the snow, it was massive flooding. People could not get out the way. They also believe that there's an additional $400 million in cow-calf losses, $440 million in crop losses. This is just one picture. All right, this is just one picture that I've got here. It says as many as 1 million calves. I can't imagine now. 1 million calves lost in Nebraska. Beef prices in the U.S. to escalate dramatically in the coming months. This could be worse than the droughts that we've seen across the Midwest from a couple years ago. So you're talking about the future, the economic of these farmers, 1 million calves that they're expected to grow. According to the Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue, there may be many as 1 million calves lost in Nebraska due to the catastrophic flooding that has hit the state. The quote, "This is not a rumor," said, "this is not an exaggeration, and this is not based on any sort of speculation." He's trying to make it as serious as he can for those in Nebraska. This number comes to us directly from the top agricultural official in the entire country, and it means that the economic toll from the recent floods is far greater than most of us had anticipated. All right, so I got a little video here with his announcement of this flooding. So let's play that video, and I'll be right back.
Devastating, truly devastating floods have hit the state of Nebraska. 74 cities, 65 counties in that state have declared emergencies. Joining us now is the governor of Nebraska, Pete Ricketts. Governor, thank you for being with us on the show. I know that you toured the damage. Describe to us what you saw, please. How bad is it?
Well, this is the worst and most widespread flooding damage we've had in our state's history. As you mentioned, 65 counties out of 93, which means that over 2/3 of our counties have declared an emergency. And what we're seeing is just widespread destruction to public infrastructure, to homes, to businesses. This really is the biggest disaster as far as damage we've ever faced in our state.
So would you just listen for a moment to Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue? He was on the show yesterday. Listen to what he had to say about agriculture in your state. Roll tape, please.
They think there may be as many as 1 million calves lost in Nebraska. That's catastrophic, and we're going to do everything we can to help those people get back on their feet.
I'll repeat that, Governor. 1 million calves gone in Nebraska. What do you want from the federal government?
Well, right now, we filed our paperwork for the federal disaster declaration. And so we're encouraging the federal government to be able to process that as quickly as possible so we can begin tapping into those resources. Just from an agricultural standpoint, we think we've got at least $400 million in livestock losses, $440 million in crop losses. We think the public infrastructure damage is in the hundreds of millions of dollars as well. We've had over 2,000 homes, 341 businesses that we know of. These are just the initial assessments. We're still waiting for floodwaters to go down to be able to do a more detailed assessment. We know we've got 200 miles of roads, 14 state bridges, and that doesn't count any of the county roads, county bridges, U.S. highways. We know we've got tremendous damage here in our state, and so we'd like to get that federal disaster declaration as quickly as possible so we can start working on rebuilding.
And that's why I told you that we're going to try to keep covering some of this story, because this is far from over. Springtime hasn't hit yet. Tornado season hasn't actually come in with the changes in the season. So we've got a long way to go on this story. And it's going to cost. It's going to cost dearly, especially to the farmers. Flooding, is this prophetic? All right, so let's talk about this now. Prophetic, what does God tell us is coming? I just got a couple of scriptures here. And other than the Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 that we always talk about with blessings and cursings, God has other warnings for our nation for our disobedience to his holy word. Look at Haggai 1 verse 6. It says, "You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink and never have your full. You put on clothes but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. And Jeremiah says this, in Jeremiah 12, verse 13, that they have sown wheat, but they have reaped thorns. They have put themselves to pain, but not to profit. But be ashamed of your harvest because of the fierce anger of the Lord. So why am I telling you this? Because you see, the society today is telling us this all has to do with green. We're just not green enough. That these cows, because of their gas and their emissions, and they're putting a carbon footprint out, it's causing all these problems. The truth is, God's telling us, because of our ways that we live, that God is bringing this type of calamity down upon our society. So as we go through these things, that you're going to see the Pope, you're going to see government agencies, you're going to see the world continue to draw closer to that 2030 agreement that they're trying to pull everybody into, where they have total control of everybody's lives, your money and everything that you do. So they're trying to pull all that in because Satan knows through our disobedience that all these things are going to happen. So what he does is he displaces the blame from the disobedience to something that has nothing to do with that. Is because of our disobedience to God. So that's where we're at right now. And so you're seeing all these things coming to pass. We're at the beginning of the fire season. You can possibly see more fires out west because they had a lot of rain this year. And when they get into the drought season, all that rich, lush growth now is going to begin to dry out again and have a huge fire problem out in the Midwest. We could possibly begin again this year on top of the last 2 years. So all of these things are coming into play. All of this comes into play for our next stories that we're going to be talking about today. They're putting all of this together and where we're going through. All right, so now, here's another one. This all ties in together, Chick-fil-A. We just talked about Chick-fil-A last week, so I'm calling this the canary in the mine, all right? This is like a bellwether of things to come. So, you know, I was thinking a lot about this for our churches. People say we want to grow and we want to have the attention. It's quite possible God's keeping us in the shadows right now, where the growth will be slower because Chick-fil-A is not in the shadows. And look what they're going through. I mean, this is becoming ever-increasing persecution upon that church, that business, Chick-fil-A. So what's happened now? This was last week, we brought it up, on March 8th, 2019, or last month. This is Chick-fil-A in the news for San Antonio. All right, this was the city council keeping them out of the airport. Now, because of that, we see it happening again April 2nd. This was the airport in New York, scratched plans for a Chick-fil-A location following an anti-LGBTQ controversy. How is it that everybody is in tune to their feelings? How come is it they're in tune to Muslim feelings, but nobody's in tune to Christian feelings? In other words, when did it become okay to persecute and become acceptable? I thought this was supposed to be for everyone. All right, so in Buffalo, New York, same problem. Earlier this month, the San Antonio City Council scratched a new Chick-fil-A location from their airport with their expansion plans. Now, New York's Buffalo Niagara International Airport has done the exact same thing. All right, so now we're seeing, because of their stance, believe it or not, it's not a stance against LGBTQ, it's a stance upon godly values. There's a big difference. They do not go out to attack anyone. They do not prevent anyone from going into their stores. They simply have stood on moral values based upon the biblical principles of the Bible. And that irritates, that brings about hatred, venom against their company because of their stance. We're seeing the beginning, and this is why I called it the canary in the mine. Remember the story of the canary? They put the canary, and if the canary died, there was bad gases in there. So now, because of what you're seeing happening, because they're in the focal, they're in the front, that's happening now. It's going to happen more and more to Christian organizations and to God's people before this is all over, all right? They're in the line of fire. March 28th, the Assemblyman for the state criticized the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority's decision to include Chick-fil-A in the development plans. Chick-fil-A has a long history of supporting and funding the LGBTQ organizations. Now, I'm going to stop for a second. They have a long history of supporting anti-LGBTQ organizations. Well, it's only actually been around like this in that form since 2015. So I don't know what their long history is, but I'm going to show you where they're upset about which of the organizations. It says, in fact, the San Antonio City Council recently rejected a plan to open a Chick-fil-A at the San Antonio International Airport due to discriminatory advocacy. As a state entity, the NFTA has a responsibility, it says, to avoid doing business with corporations who fund hateful and divisive groups, right? Okay. If that was true, I can understand where they're coming from. But let's take a look now at the list of those hateful groups. Y'all ready for that? The hateful groups that the Chick-fil-A is supporting. The company has continued to face judgment after giving nearly $2 million on donations to. Are you ready for this? Here's the first hate group, the Salvation Army. I'm not making that up. They listed that as one of the hate groups. What's another one? The Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Oh yeah, they're just such a bunch of hateful people with their broad jumps and high jumps and running track and swimming. You know, probably do away with the Olympics too, because they're such hateful people. Unbelievable. Got one more. The Paul Anderson Youth Home. All them kids, you know how hateful those kids are? Unbelievable. This is three of the names that they listed that they donated $2 million in their hate group support. I'm not making that up. There's a little segment that we'll be coming in later on this year with that hopefully Audrey's going to be bringing in for a section she wants to. You can't make this stuff up, but that's where it's at. All organizations have a history of anti-LGBTQ policies. Truth is, it's standing on the biblical principles. That's all it is. The biblical principles of love. Love the person, hate the sin. And they cannot understand that what they do is sinful, and they have to repent of all those type of sins. And that's where the hate comes in, the hate against God's people. All right, what used to be discrimination now, we've been getting wrapping this little section up now. Let's begin to go into something serious here. What used to become discrimination has now become holy righteousness, and what we're witnessing at the beginning of Revelation 13, verses 16 through 17. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, that no one be able to buy or sell except who has the mark or the name of the beast or his number. Let's tie that in. What has this got to do with Chick-fil-A? They're locking them out. Pretty soon, they'll be shutting them down. And the point here is, unless you have the mark of the beast, or in other words, you're willing to have the LGBTQ, or this global environment that's going to be developed, the global governmental system led up by the Pope and the Holy Roman Revival, unless you have that, you're not going to be able to buy and to sell. So my question is, could we be seeing the canary in the mine? Is Chick-fil-A the bellwether of things to come, of how we need to watch? Because they are in the forefront. You know, they maintain Sunday, not Saturday, but at least they're trying to maintain biblical principles. They may not understand the Sabbath yet, but it's quite possible before Jesus Christ returns that he could open their minds. Wouldn't it be amazing if they opened their minds to live by the values and include the Sabbath day in God's holy days? Something to think about. You don't know. God talks about it to Revelation. At the end time, there'll be an innumerable multitude that's going to come out of tribulation. And who knows? People with that type of character, like that owner of Chick-fil-A, just maybe God will open his mind so that he'll keep the Sabbath and the holy days. All right. This next segment is really, really important. It's going to bring a lot of pieces of a puzzle now. It says, I am Jesus the Messiah. All right, I'm Jesus the Messiah. All right, so take a walk with me now. So what are we going to do now is I'm going to bring you over to the new set of what we're working on for God's Unchanging Word. And in this set, we're going to be bringing in new guests, new talent. We're going to be able to Skype. We're going to tell you a lot more about that in the future, but I just want to give you a little background on what we're doing right now. All right, so now, Louis Farrakhan, all right, says that I am Jesus the Messiah. So I don't know if you heard that. I've got a couple videos that we're going to bring out here. But there's something that's very close to this, and glad I told you about working this in because my new little clicker doesn't want to seem to work, so I'll be working with my laptop. The information here is critical that you need to understand, all right? So what's going on here, the timing of these events, what he's saying, who's involved with all of this, it is critical that you understand what's going on. All right, Louis Farrakhan, Hitler and Farrakhan, the similarities, the timing, and the goals. In a biography published in 1923, Adolf Hitler listed under the author Baron Adolf Victor von Kerber says may have actually been the pen by Adolf Hitler himself, according to the New York Times that was reported. This article was published before Hitler rose to power. It says Adolf Hitler, his life, his speeches, and accredited him with being Germany's savior and comparing Hitler to Jesus. Now, I'm not making that up. This is actually, you can go back and you can find all of this information. So now, here we are now, decades later, Louis Farrakhan, in very similar fashion, says, I represent the Messiah, all right? Here's a quote. To the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, this is in the video you're about to see. To the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, you are the Messiah. You are the Messiah to every human who wants to be civilized. This was a quote off of a platter that was given to him a few years ago. Take a look at this video, and I'll be right back.
Chalice, silver, in a cup that the chalice is placed in. Get the picture. Two Jewish rabbis stayed for hours downstairs in the lobby of our hotel. And they came upstairs finally. Mr. Harry Belafonte was in my suite. We were talking, and the Jewish rabbis gave me this. And believe me, people give me stuff, but I was so dumb, I didn't know what this is, you know. But I went home and I read the words. Yes, sir. To the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. You are the Messiah of the world. Look at this. And you are the Messiah to every human who wants to be civilized.
I let that play out because I wanted you to see how many people was in that arena, that when he heard that, how they all just stood up and continued to applaud and applaud that he is the Messiah, talking about people being civilized, all right? So now, we got another one, all right? So now, let's move on now. Here we're going to bring in something. I'm going to bring this in, then I'll bring in a second video, all right? So January 30th, 1933, Hitler was appointed the Chancellor of Germany, an enabling act that allowed him almost total dictatorship, all right? He immediately began to attack in the destruction of the Jews. 12 years later, his reign of terror was over. So I'm bringing this out now because what's being said today with the green, the 12 years, the climate people that came out in 2018, not 2019, said we got 12 years. All of these events are tying in together. Now, Matthew 24 says, Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, and his disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us when will be these things." He says, "What will be the sign of the coming and the end of the age?" The first thing that comes, he says, Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no man deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying that I am the Christ, and will deceive many." So now, what we just read about Adolf Hitler saying that he was the Messiah, probably wrote by him himself. Now we have Farrakhan coming out in very much the same way. Farrakhan says, "I represent the Messiah, I represent the Jesus, and I am that Jesus." He says, "I will finish the destruction of the Jews that was began 2,000 years ago." You just heard him say that he's the peace for all civilized people. But now he wants to eradicate the Jews that began 2,000 years ago. Now, brace yourself for the video that you're about to hear. Absolutely blasphemous in every way, shape, and form. Let's play that video.
God so loved his people that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. God does not love this world. God never sent Jesus to die for this world. Jesus died because he was 2,000 years too soon to bring about the end of the civilization of the Jews. He never was on no cross. There was no Calvary for that Jesus. Early one Saturday morning, our Savior taught us, when he found out he was 2,000 years too soon to end the civilization of the Jews, he decided that he would give his life for the truth that he taught, that his name would live until the one that he prefigured came into existence. And that's why the Quran says Jesus and his mother Mary were a sign. Jesus didn't die on Calvary. He died in front of an old Jewish store that was boarded up, and the Roman soldiers came to get him.
Let that sink in for a moment, what you just heard. Now, that alone by itself is horrible enough, but it ties into a lot more information that you will not believe. Let's talk about that. We actually began talking about this just a few weeks ago in our sermon on deception, talking about the world had just issued a 12-year ultimatum, came out in October 2018. It's about the leading climate scientists that we got 12 years if we don't make the change before we began to lose humanity. Then we found out about a faith-based organization that was actually established by the Pope, probably behind closed doors, and from all indication, when he met with President Obama in the White House on the Day of Atonement to lay down the foundation for what he was about to give to the UN. Again, 2013. All right, so we're looking at 12 years from 2018. Again, we're talking about February 22nd now. We brought all about the New Green Deal, where everybody pushing the New Green Deal said we got 12 years left from the October 2018 time. So what all these three have in common? 2030, 2030, and 2030. 12 years, 12 years. Beto O'Rourke said this, that we should do nothing less than marshal every resource in the country to meet that challenge to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels to get the net zero emissions out. So now I have a question. Is it possible that Satan, he knows he has but a short time to be put away? So we have this connection now, just like with Hitler. From the time he began in 1933, and his push was to destroy the Jews, we're at that same point right now of 12 years. So now let's put this together in a global picture of what's taking place. The Roman Pope, top Muslim, signed one world religion agreement. This was back from April 8th. The Roman Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Egypt's Al-Azhar, the highest seat of learning in the Sunni Islam, have signed a one world religion agreement titled the Document on Human Fraternity and World Peace and Living Together. What are we pulling together? We're pulling together the Muslims and we're pulling together the Christianity, pulling this all together that you're going to see the beginning of the founding of the Holy Roman Revival. What was one of the first things that Hitler did when he began in 1933 at his persecution of the Jews? Signed an agreement with the imams and the Muslim people. So now, going on, in this agreement, the agreement supports a one world fraternity of religion with the goal to bring about world peace and government for all humanity. It is an ecumenical document of the highest order, with many describing it as a historical breakthrough. What they need for the Holy Roman Revival to work, to have it on the world's scene, is for all religions to pull together to work with the governments. The biggest stumbling block is the Muslim people. Why is that important? Because they are the king of the South. So you're going to see this agreement work for a little while, and it's going to eventually break down. Why did we tell you about Europe and talk about the Brexit and the Nexit and everything that's coming out? Is because they're the king of the North. So when you're looking at everything I'm giving you today, whether you realize it or not, the piece by piece, it's all the same thing. It's all pointing to the return of Jesus Christ. And there's many pieces to the puzzle. All right, so now going on, Pope Francis, God desires solidarity among the Catholics and the Muslims. By all means, let's keep everybody together. Rome, reflecting upon his recent apostolic journey to Morocco, Pope Francis said Wednesday that God desires a greater sense of fraternity among Catholics and Muslims as the brother children in Abraham. The Pope has to make this work, to have that unity of the King of the North and the King of the South, an agreement that has to be signed, all right, for a peace to be able to take place before the breakdown comes, and eventually the Pope and the Holy Roman Revival begins to break down toward the very end. It says Morocco is more than 99% Sunni Muslim, with Catholics counting to less than 1/10 of 1%. Here's the power that this man has, all right, that he wields under Satan's control. They have less than 1/10 of 1% in everybody down in Morocco, and everybody's bowing down to him. That's an amazing when you put this together, according to the population, according to their State Department. Here you see them. That this is actually in Morocco. They was actually coming together now. So now here we have. I'm bringing this back in again. This is the slide I showed you just a few minutes ago. So what if God is showing us? I don't know if this is true or not. It could go on further. But when you look at the events and how much is pulled together, we have this 12 years. When you look at everything that we're pointing to from the green and from the climate and from all these other things that are all pointing to, 12 years. Is God showing us in advance that time is running out, that we need to get ourselves ready? It's quite possible. So what else would we be looking for here, all right? In this reign of terror, we're going to begin to see something else begin to rule its ugly head. What we went before, this is what went before. Hajj Aman al-Husseini was a Nazi collaborator and the model for today's Islam. This is out of the Palestine-Israel conflict. This is an article that was written, 1,400 years of Arab-Jew hatred and Islamic genocide. Here we have when Hitler, 1933, first thing he did is he began to persecute the Jews. What else did he need? Just like the Pope, he has to have the Arab world behind him for all this to work. Remember, there has to be a surrounding of armies around Jerusalem. So here we have the exact same pattern taking place at the exact same period of time, 12 years. Does it have anything important? I don't know, but it sure looks like it to me. And I'm going to be bringing you out some accords that took place in 2015 on specific days in God's calendar, bringing in Tammuz 9, Tammuz 17, and the 9th of Av. All these things all tie in together, and 2015 was a pivotal moment of all these events that you're beginning to see line up right now. So let's go a little bit further. This is what that Imam said back in 1933. It says, Arabs, arise as one man and fight for your sacred rights. Kill the Jews wherever you find them. This pleases God, history, and religion. This saves your honor. God is with you. What did we just hear from Farrakhan? He said that God waited 2,000 years to get the right person in place to continue to bring what? The genocide of the Jewish people. So you're seeing it rise up more and more and more. They're not taking them off the air. They're not censoring them on the internet. That's out there wide and clear. What we're beginning to see is the foundation of the formulation of the type that took place in pre-World War II Germany beginning to build right now, right here in the United States. You've seen the Pope lining all these things up together. So anyway, that's what we're looking at right here. So here we see Louis Farrakhan in 2018, is he's in Iran and he's chanting "Death to America" with the Iranian students. Don't take my word for it. Go look it up. You'll find it. It's there. Nobody wants to talk about that. And he's talking about peace in a civil society while he's over there chanting with Iran, "Death to America" and "Death to the Jews." I don't know. I don't know how this can continue to go on and people don't see what's actually taking place. Now the question, we want to bring in our nuggets portion of this. The duality of the timing of the resurrection of Christ in the Old and New Testaments is hidden because of a false assumption, right? This was the question we started with last week. We'll take a break. All right, so let's go. Let's give you the question. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." All right, so here's our question. What is the false assumption of Exodus 12, verses 1 and 2 that obscures the timing of the plan of God? You had a whole week. We actually got a correct answer, but I'm not going to tell it to you yet. We're going to take a little break. All right, so this is what I had last week. Let's get to the break. So when we come back in our biblical nuggets portion of the program, we're going to talk about the Passover, and we're going to answer that question. But let's take a break now, and let's watch The Agony by our own Mark Rusinko, and then I'll be right back.
Drops of blood flowing down his beard in the garden of agony and fear. And he cried unto his Father, "Take this cup from me. My soul is deep in sorrow. Will you let it pass from me? Not my will, but I give it unto thee." Continue through the night, with beatings till the morning light. All who saw him were amazed. They could not recognize his face. And he cried unto his Father, "Take this cup from me. My soul is deep in sorrow, will you let it pass from me? Not my will, but I give it unto thee. No, not my will, but I give it unto thee." earthquake, then the veil was torn away. His lifeless body hung upon a tree, then placed in a tomb for all to see. Who was this man who led us by his hand, guiding us into the way of truth? I guess we did not know how to give his soul, to pay the price for us to make us whole. Many years have passed into the haze since Jesus Christ died upon us day. Memories often fade away, but the agony always will remain. And he cried unto his Father, take this cup from me. My soul is deep in sorrow, will that it pass from me. Not my will, but I give it unto thee. No, not my will, but I give it unto thee. Not my will, but I give it unto thee. No, not my will, but I give it unto thee.
Emotional. It's Mark Rasenko put that together. I got a chance to work with him last year, putting the video pieces together. So I hope you appreciate the amount of work and talent that it took to bring all that in. And it's something it just moves you as you move closer and closer to Passover, to help you with the mindset of what Jesus Christ actually went through. Okay, now for our nuggets portion of the program now. The duality in God's plan. The first thing we want to talk about, though, is that question. The answer was covered in our Exodus series, Exodus chapter 7. It was in the reestablishment of time that we had the actual answer. It was quite interesting how y'all wrote in on some of these things. There's the actual answer that you're looking at right there. This was the slide. The person who actually got it right is the second person, believe it or not. And I'll explain that in just a second. The assumption is that it was the beginning of months, the first month of the year, that it must be the first day of the week. So when they reestablish the calendar, when they come out of Egypt, the reason they don't have the duality right, that it actually fell on a Wednesday of the Passover that week, is because they have the wrong day of the week. And we're going to show you that from this chapter. We actually got the correct answer from a gentleman up in northwest Canada. It was in the mailbox at 7:05, 1 hour after it went out. He actually brought in the right answer. But he'd already had one of my books, so he asked me to go ahead and pass it on to someone else. So the correct answer came in Saturday morning from the second person, from a Miss Sandra Kay of Memphis, Tennessee. All right, from Memphis, Tennessee. She got the answer right, came in on Saturday morning. But another person came in and had something very similar, talking about on January versus God's New Year. So we're going to send that gentleman a book also for participating and being a part of it. So now, let's talk about this, Nisan Abib in the first month. Exodus 12 verse 2 says, this shall be the beginning of months, the first month of the year to you. So I'm going to show you what the assumption is and why it goes wrong. So the assumption is the first day of the week, which is actually a Sunday. They believe that is Exodus 12 verses 1 and 2. All right, so now, this is in the reestablishment of time chapter. So this is Exodus 16 now. Let's walk you through this, and I'll show you the difference. And they took their journey from Elim, and the congregation of the children of Israel went to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sin, on the 15th day of the second month. Now, this is what gives us the background of how we build the calendar. It's actually built around the Sabbath day, all right? This is in the series that we had a couple years ago. So if you're new and you haven't seen that, you can go online and you can get them. But this is pieces a little shorter than what we talked about there. So here's the first month. All right, Exodus 12, 1 and 2. Then you have the second month, right? So the Bible's telling us now in Exodus 16 that the information that we're going to pick up now is in the second month, which was going to build us back. So we're going to build the calendar from here, and we're going to take us back into the first month. All right, so now it's the 15th day of the second month. So right now, at this point, we don't know which day of the week the 15th is. All right, so the Bible doesn't tell us this yet. It tells us by understanding the Sabbath day. So how do we do that? Verse 1. On the 15th day of the second month, they come into the land. It says, and that evening you shall know that the Lord, and it talks about the quails. Remember, God says, I will give you quails in the evening, in the morning that there would be manna on the earth. It says, in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord. So now, God says, so they gathered that glory on the earth, which we know today as manna that God gave them, every morning, they said. Then in verse 22, it says, on the sixth day, you gather twice as much. So when God spoke to him, he says this, tonight you're gonna have quail. Tomorrow morning there's going to be the dew. All right, so they have to go out and gather twice as much. On the sixth day, they gather for 6 days. Tomorrow is the Sabbath. This is verse 23. It says, and they laid it up until morning. So now what you're saying is you get quail, then you go out for 6 days and you gather, and the seventh day is the Sabbath day, is what God's saying. So he's building his calendar around the establishment of his Sabbath day. And Moses says, eat today, for today is the Sabbath to the Lord, verse 25. So during the holy days this year, if you haven't gone through this, pull this out, pull your chapter out, and look for Exodus number 7, or go online and look for number 7, and we go through this in its entirety. When you're at home and you have a moment, take the Bible and go through Exodus and read chapter 16, and it walks you through the events. Now, this makes sense as to why God was doing that. So now, what is God showing us here? The 15th day of the second month. All right, so the 15th day of the second month. Now, I put it here because it says they're going to gather for 6 days. You can put it anywhere you want. Eventually, this is where you're going to find it because God's calendar has 30 days. At evening, the quails are going to come. In the morning, you shall see the glory of the Lord. So you're going to gather for 6 days. All right, so now, all right, so 15th day, they're going to gather for 6 days in a row. 16 all the way through. That's 6 days they gather twice as much, right? On the 6th day. And so now, on the 7th day, it says, verse 23, tomorrow is the Sabbath. So God talks to him on the 15th. He says, tonight you're going to get quail. Go out and gather tomorrow morning for 6 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On this day, he says, gather twice as much. Then it says, because tomorrow is the Sabbath day. So there you have it. So now we got a starting point for the calendar. So God says, now here we have the 22nd day. God reestablishes his calendar. The amazing thing is that when he talked to him on the 15th, that was also a Sabbath day. And that's why they couldn't gather then. And he brought the quail that night, was right after the Sabbath day. So now it's real simple. So now we count back ways to fill in the calendar, all right? So you see now on the calendar now. If we can go ahead and keep that up, Jeff, if you would just keep it on the screen. So here's 14, and now I put it on a kind of autopilot, and it starts counting back ways all the way to the first of the month. All right, so there's the first of the month, of the second month. So now we back into the first month, knowing God's calendar has 30 days. So now it begins counting back ways again. So you can see it going all the way back. And you'll find that the 14th day, when they keep the Passover, is actually on the 14th. The duality of the plan of God, Jesus crucified in the New Testament on the 14th in the midst of the week. God designed this, that when they came out of Egypt, on the 14th day, it falls on a Wednesday also. Absolutely amazing how God aligned everything. So now, the Passover for the Israelites fell on a Wednesday at the exact same time it was during the time of Christ's crucifixion. With this understanding that we can now show that the events of the Old Testament parallel the events of the New Testament at the time of Jesus Christ. So now let's continue to finish up our calendar. It's counting back ways all the way through to the first. So the misunderstanding and the assumption now, all right, you ready? Where we thought it was on a Sunday that the world teaches, The first day actually began on the Thursday of that year. See, God's calendar never stopped. It began with Adam. Even though they lost time, God never did. So God reestablishes. So what do we see? Exodus 12, verses 1 and 2 actually started on a Thursday of the week. Also on the 10th day, when they set the lamb aside, is the exact same time in the New Testament on a Sabbath with Jesus Christ. Well, that's it. All right, so now let's begin wrapping up our program. From the home office, April 12, 2019, Nisan 7 on God's calendar. We visited out to Trinidad with the brethren. I want to apologize that I couldn't get it in yet this week because of time. But the information about what was going on with the Pope and with Farrakhan, I thought that was critical, that we need to bring that out too, because I need to build on that. So, but here I'm going to bring in, I've got the information, I got a lot of pictures from them. So this is, let me back that up again. All right, this is the home with Jai and his wife Shirley. So we're going to talk to you about their visit in their home that was actually underwater and all the work the brethren did to help the community reestablish. It's an amazing story. And I wanted to give it to you today, but it just ran out of time. DVDs in the mail, Deception, Lying Wonders, Part 2. Prove All Things, Part 4, News, Nuggets, and Insights. It's in the mail. You should be getting yours pretty soon. 2 weeks ago, we sent out, almost 2 weeks ago, April Newsletter Quarterly, and the DVD offering for this month is Integrity in a Post-Christian Nation. So if you didn't get yours yet, write in and get on the mailing list so we can send that to you right away. Passover DVD. Now, by the time you get this, there isn't much time to get you that DVD. So this goes out on Friday. Passover is Thursday night. If you're writing to get a DVD, you need to write in or call right away. Because if we don't get that to you out by Monday, you may not get it in time. So anyway, if you're looking for a Passover DVD where you don't have a group that you can worship with, let us know and we will send you a Passover DVD. You can keep a Passover in your home. All right. Springtime. Some areas in the south is turning into springtime. In the north, they're still getting snow. All right, so we're going to keep a little snow up there for just a little bit longer before we move our little puppies and dogs and animals over to the spring. Our closing video. This is a funny video. Kids are going to love this. This is called The Passover Rhapsody. Take a look and I'll be right back.
Is this the real life? No end to slavery. Caught in Pharaoh's vice. No escape to reality. Open your eyes. Look up to the skies and see. God will redeem you so miraculously. 'Cause 10 plagues come, then we'll go. Blood and frogs, lice and boils. Moses, you are dreaming. This could never happen to me. To me. Pharaoh, let my people go to fulfill our destiny. With the Torah we'll be free.
Moses, tell your God I've just begun. My heart is hardened. The Hebrews are here to stay.
Pharaoh, wild animals running loose. Soon you'll wish you'd never been born at all. I see cattle dying, clouds of locusts swarm. Fire and ice, fire and ice. Plague of hail is coming. Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me. Days of darkness, days of darkness.
We cannot see, we cannot move. Condemn this war crime fiasco.
Listen here, Pharaoh, let my people
Who
go.
is done? No, we will not let you go.
Let us go.
Who is done? We will not let you go.
Let us go.
Who is done? We will not let you go.
Let us go.
Will not let you go.
Let us go.
Never let you go.
Let us go.
No, 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 no.
God in heaven, Calling in his midnight, let us go.
The angel of death has now taken our first war.
Vampires are free. Moses, take us out to the desert to die. Jump in the water and watch God carve out fire. God did this for us, drown the Egyptians so we can get out of here.
No, Hametz, we're free. Time to get the Torah.
Time to get the Torah and be free.
That's a pretty cute little video. Truth of the matter is, Jesus Christ does set us free. May your Passover be blessed, that your year ahead be filled with God's Holy Spirit. Till next time, thanks again for watching our news, nuggets, and insights. And again, from all of us here at God's Unchanging Word, thanks again for watching. Have a great week and have a great Passover and first day of unleavened bread.